Hi again then guys, and welcome to another bike review, of course, from the second ride game in particular, and this is a bike which I actually thoroughly enjoyed looking into, and I love it when that happens. It happens with a few different series on the channel, with unsung heroes, be it with a forgotten car, sometimes with a car review in a general sense, and more often than not I find that it happens pretty much every time with a motorbike review, because bikes just have this slightly different feel to their production, I would argue, than certain cars do. Bikes don't tend to feel, as often at least, built by committee. A lot of cars are just built to sell, and although of course a ton of bikes are, they're seen, at least in racing games, to be more bikes that are made with a specific vision in mind. And this is certainly one of those, because I initially thought that the Bmw Hp4 was basically just a cash grab, if you will, like a fancy special edition that's a couple of kilos lighter than an S1000, which, let's be honest, is already more than good enough. I would argue it's the Nissan GTR of bikes. But, to keep that analogy running, this, as it turns out, is kind of like the Spec V GTR of bikes, because did the GTR, strictly speaking, need to be any faster? There's an argument for the answer being no. But does that mean it was a bad idea? Definitely not. Because the faster and faster GTRs over the years have broken more and more records, made more and more fans, and certainly made owners happy. And that is the most important thing. I don't need to love the car, as long as the people who do love it are happy with it. That to me is the occasion here, because I do like the BMW S1000RR. I remember when it first came out, I was stunned that BMW had finally done something on that tier, because as far as I can recall, the fastest thing that they'd built before the S1000 I think was the K1200S, which for those who don't know is kind of a Honda Blackbird style machine. It's a long distance continent crusher, great top end speed, very comfortable, but pretty big, pretty cumbersome, not exactly a track bike. Then they come out with this, with the express intention of superbike racing, and they didn't just build a bike that was passable enough to enter, they clearly wanted to develop the best possible superbike they could, and it shows, because just like how when Porsche, for instance, enters motorsport, they go all in to win, not just to show up, BMW clearly did the same with this bike. Now, the HP4 is far from just being a special edition cash grab. It is not that in the slightest. What it actually is far more similar to the difference between GTR and GTR Spec V from Nissan than you might think, because what they did is they took everything that was already fantastic about the S1000, which is pretty much everything: the look, the sound, the performance, the handling, and the technology, coupled with the reliability that Italian bikes can only dream about, and then they turned all of those things up to 11. Now, this bike is packed full of tech. It has electronically adapting dampers which change the ride feel while you're riding it, and there are different modes to switch between. It's essentially like the ultimate melding of track and road bike, and that is exactly what they wanted it to be. It also has launch control, of course, the obvious stuff like ABS, but even traction control is included, with 15 different settings to choose between depending on how restrictive you want it to be. And when you're actually riding it, all of that technology, once again to go back to the Nissan GTR, has a very familiar way, just like that car does, of helping you to become a faster rider, in this case, a faster driver in the case of a car. Now, some people might not like that. I've said myself, I don't like cars that do all of the work for you, and the same could be said for a bike, and I could certainly understand if that was a qualm for some people with the Beamer. But for those who do appreciate having technology used to its fullest as an aid, making it almost like the closest thing to an AI bike, if you will, I think it does a remarkably good job of that. Because yes, the regular S1000 was already a nearly 200 horsepower bike with a fantastic, inspired choice, I think, of a 1-litre engine. It's the perfect median between the sprightliness of a 600 and the lower weight and physical size, but also with the torquiness and the power that you might sometimes rely on a 1200 or a 1400 for, like a Suzuki Hayabusa or a Honda Blackbird, or even something like a Kawasaki ZX-14R, for example. It has the advantages of both, but kind of cancels out both of the disadvantages. It's powerful and big enough to be beefy, but it's not too heavy either. And the HP4 does improve that yet again. This is a borderline insane bike when it comes to spec, because it's another 6 kilos lighter than the regular S1000, which in the bike world is kind of a big deal. That's like making a car about 150 kilos lighter in comparison, and it has 195 horses, 195 horses in a 169 kilo bike. It's no surprise that the category is 807 points. That's borderline Ducati Panigale territory. I mean, literally, that's an 808 PP bike, so it's right there with it. And even though the Panigale tends to be a more famous bike in the superbike scene, at least from what I've heard and from the kind of drooling that people do over that bike compared to this one, I would actually argue that this is potentially an even better machine. That 1 litre 4-cylinder motor is gorgeous, it's smooth, it's reliable, and even real-life owners' reviews have said that it's been among, if not the best, bike that they've ever owned, basically, for reliability. The yearly servicing is £150. That's insane. And the thing that impressed me the most about the HP4 was actually the price, because not only does the HP4 undercut many of its rivals from, for instance, Italy, such as the aforementioned Ducati, by a couple of thousand credits, but in real life as well. It is significantly cheaper than I ever would have assumed. Now, some people may call me crazy, but I assumed that a bike like this would have been maybe £60,000, £70,000. And I would have understood if it was that price. It kind of reminds me of a Ducati Desmo, and that does have that kind of price. The HP4, however, is not a £60,000 or £70,000 bike. In fact, the brand new price when this came out is a borderline bonkers £17,000. And although, yes, that is a lot of money for a motorbike, if you compare that to car value, that is insane. A bike that can do 200 miles an hour, outrun any car for that price, of course around a track and in a straight line also, but also having that level of build quality with the aluminium swing arm, which many people drool over in its own right, the gorgeous asymmetrical styling, which I love, and of course the sheer build quality that you will arguably never really get from any Italian manufacturer. To me, that is exactly why I think of this as being the GTR of bikes. It's got the great price, it's semi-understated, you certainly wouldn't call a GTR as pretty as many Italian cars, but it's overwhelmingly fast, surprisingly forgiving, and the only piece of advice or warning that I would give about riding the HP4 in the game is watch out for second gear, because it does like to lift the front end. Beyond that, it's a brilliant bike. So overall, if you're looking for a fantastic superbike in Ride 2, definitely look into the HP4. This is a brilliant machine, and it certainly is not just a cash grab special edition. But overall, that's it for this review. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.